Be me, Mark, 33, Operations Optimization Specialist at a logistics tech company. My job title sounds important, but most people think I fix printers or count boxes. In reality, I map routes, warehouse flows, and contract constraints until the chaos becomes math. I live inside spreadsheets, SQL queries, and maps full of angry little red lines. When the lines turn green, nobody remembers my name, and I like it that way. Boss is Darren, operations director with a stressed smile and a calendar that owns him. He hates confrontation, loves good metrics, and treats silence like a management strategy. As long as my dashboards stay green, he leaves me alone and calls it leadership. Company culture is bland, corporate, and mostly functional in the boring kind of way. Do your work, hit targets, get a bonus, and try not to get stuck in meetings. It is not a dream job, but it pays and it stays quiet. Quiet is a luxury when you grew up watching bills like they were weather forecasts. Then we land a monster client, a retail giant called Titan Mart, with a supply chain on fire. Their network is a museum of bad decisions, ancient contracts, and warehouses placed like darts. They want faster deliveries, lower costs, and fewer customer complaints on social media. They also want it yesterday because corporations only understand urgency and penalties. Darren drops the project on my desk like it is a hot potato with a 5-star contract. I spend 8 weeks living in their data, sleeping in 4-hour chunks and eating desk dinners. I build a new model, reroute half their lanes, rebalance inventory, and rewrite their replenishment logic. By the first quarter, we cut waste hard and saved them a number with 6 zeros. Titan Mart sends a thank you email that gets forwarded across leadership like a trophy photo. Darren looks like a hero in meetings, and I let him have it because I prefer anonymity. I get a bonus big enough to breathe and a quiet pat on the back from the CFO. For a few months, life settles into a stable rhythm of work puzzles and peaceful evenings. Then spring hits and leadership decides we need a culture refresh because growth loves buzzwords. All hands email arrives with bright language and a dozen exclamation points in the subject line. Introducing our new head of people experience, Vanessa Klein, joining us to transform how we work. Email is full of synergy, belonging, brave conversations, and something about rewriting old narratives. My eyes glaze over halfway because corporate poetry is the opposite of useful information. First meeting with Vanessa is in the big conference room with the cold air and bad coffee. She walks in like she owns the place. Tailored blazer, perfect posture, and a practiced smile. She talks about psychological safety like it is oxygen, and we have been breathing wrong for years. She says we need to move beyond outdated measures of success and embrace whole-person performance. Older engineers stare like she is speaking in a new dialect. Younger ones try not to smirk. Marketing and HR folks nod hard, like approval is part of their performance review. I sit near the back thinking about a fuel surcharge model that is eating our margins. Vanessa calls our previous culture transactional and says we must evolve past cold efficiency. She says data can be used to silence people and we should center lived experience. I feel a small chill because I am literally the data person everyone calls when reality bites. Still, I assume it is a phase, like the time leadership tried meditation Tuesdays for 3 weeks. Then the changes start, slow enough to feel harmless and constant enough to become normal. First is Monday check-in circles, mandatory cameras on, names, roles, pronouns, and gratitude. 30 minutes per week multiplied across the company, a quiet bonfire of payroll. Gratitude prompts turn into humble brag theater about weekend hikes and personal growth podcasts. When it is my turn, I say my name, my role, and that I am grateful for coffee. Vanessa gives me a tight smile, like my gratitude is not sufficiently enlightened. Next comes the workshops, 4 hours at a time, with consultants who charge more than engineers. The slides are stock photos of diverse teams laughing at salads in bright white offices. Consultant says meritocracy is often a myth that protects power structures. Consultant says objective thinking can be a mask for bias and exclusion. I stare at my laptop and fix a routing bug while they explain that logic has an attitude problem. Vanessa keeps glancing at me like I am a case study that learned to type. After that, a new Slack channel appears called Brave Space, moderated by Vanessa and her team. It is framed as a place to share feelings without judgment and to surface invisible harms. Within a week, it becomes a public complaint board with polite language and sharp edges. Someone says the office temperature feels hostile. Vanessa responds with gratitude and a heart emoji. Someone says a teammate used a dismissive tone in an email. Vanessa calls it a valid experience. Complaints are vague by design because vagueness cannot be disproven. People stop joking in chat because humor is easy to interpret as harm. Hallway conversations get quieter because nobody wants to be a screenshot. The office feels like it has installed a compliance layer over basic human interaction. I keep my headphones on and focus on my work because numbers still keep me safe. Then Vanessa announces a new values framework with a scorecard attached to performance reviews. Values include courage, curiosity, inclusion, and something called relational excellence. There is a new expectation that leaders will demonstrate these values in measurable ways. Measurable is funny because most of it reads like it was written to be unmeasurable. Still, I think I can survive by staying calm and producing results like always. The real turning point arrives at the quarterly budget meeting in the executive boardroom. Darren is sweating in advance because budgets are where cowardice meets accountability. Vanessa presents a flagship program called the Horizon Initiative, with a price tag that makes eyes twitch. It includes new consultants, new software, a new recruitment policy, and a full-time culture team. It also includes a new promotion philosophy that de-emphasizes technical output in favor of cultural leadership. Vanessa frames it as investment in humanity, while the finance folks do silent mental arithmetic. She speaks with confident warmth, like disagreement would be proof of moral deficiency. Darren thanks her and asks if anyone has questions, and the room turns to stone. Nobody wants to be the first to challenge the culture program in front of the culture boss. Then Darren makes the mistake of looking at me, because I am the one who speaks spreadsheet. He says, "Mark, can you sanity check the impact, since you know the numbers better than anyone?" I can feel the trap, but my whole job is sanity checks, and I do not have a fake mode. I stand, plug in my laptop, and pull up a clean sheet with simple assumptions and clear math. I say the first year cost is roughly $780,000, including fees and headcount. I say that same money would fund the fleet tracking upgrade we've requested for 2 years. I say the tracking upgrade has a projected ROI above 200% within 12 months. I switch tabs and show public case studies from similar firms that adopted similar culture programs. I say they saw productivity dips in year one and increased attrition among senior specialists. I do not shout, I do not sneer, and I keep my tone like a weather report. The room goes quiet in the heavy way because numbers are stubborn and everyone knows it. Vanessa smiles, slow and smooth, like she has been waiting for me to volunteer as the villain. She thanks me for the spreadsheet-based perspective and says it is useful to see that mindset. Then she says some people can only measure value in dollars and minutes, and that is the old model. She says the rest of us are building a workplace where people thrive, not just output. It is a clean rhetorical move because she turns math into a personality flaw. Darren nods too fast, desperate to show he is on the right moral team. He says we cannot always measure human outcomes, and we must invest in our people. Horizon Initiative is approved, and I feel something in me go quiet and cold. It is not anger. It is the sound of understanding how the game is played. The retaliation does not arrive as an explosion. It arrives as paperwork and invitations. Vanessa rolls out a new 360 feedback tool with anonymous submissions tied to values alignment. Everyone is encouraged to contribute observations so we can grow together as a community. 2 weeks later, I get a calendar invite labeled Values Coaching, hosted by Vanessa. Darren is not there because Darren avoids rooms where choices must be defended. Vanessa sits with a printed folder and a calm voice that sounds like policy. She says she has received a concerning volume of feedback about my communication patterns. She does not name sources because anonymity is the shield that makes accusations cheap. She reads vague lines about intimidation, dominance, and gatekeeping information. I ask for a specific example so I can understand and correct it. She smiles and says, "We are not here to debate incidents. We are here to notice patterns." Patterns is the magic word that means I cannot win by asking for facts. I leave the meeting with no action items except to be less myself. I continue doing good work because good work is the only language I trust. Then a junior analyst makes a formula error in a cost model headed to TitanMart. I message her privately, point out the mistake, show the correct approach, and reassure her. 2 days later, I am in another values coaching meeting about how I shamed a colleague. Vanessa says the impact matters more than intent, and my impact created fear. My private message is described as a public humiliation because narrative beats reality now. Coworkers start avoiding me in subtle ways, like the office has decided I am contagious. Break room conversations stop when I enter, and eyes find screens like screens are lifeboats. I email Darren asking for clarity and support, and he replies with a vague note about alignment. He offers no specifics because specifics would force him to pick a side. Weeks pass and my performance numbers stay excellent, yet my social standing keeps eroding. My review arrives with a new section labeled Culture Contribution, and my score is suddenly average. Darren says it is not about output alone, and he cannot ignore the feedback ecosystem. I realize the system is designed to treat output as one vote among many feelings. The final meeting happens on a Thursday afternoon, with rain tapping the windows like quiet applause. Calendar invite says urgent, and I already know what urgent means in corporate language. Darren sits pale, Vanessa sits composed, and there is a script on the table like a weapon. Darren reads that my role is no longer aligned with the company's forward-facing culture strategy. I ask directly if this is based on performance or on anonymous complaints. Darren says it is a holistic assessment, which means he is hiding behind fog. Vanessa slides a severance agreement across the table with the non-disparagement clause. They are buying my silence because silence is cheaper than admitting error. I sign because I have rent and I have learned that pride does not pay. Security escorts me to my desk like I am a threat to morale by existing. I pack my mug, a notebook, and a photo of my dog, while coworkers pretend not to see. As I walk out, I feel less rage than I expected, because the game is now obvious. Next months are brutal in a slow way, not dramatic, just heavy and constant. I interview well because my work is real and my results are undeniable. Then reference checks happen and the air changes, like doors quietly closing. A recruiter I trust finally tells me the Whisper network is loud about my name. Official line is culture fit. Unofficial line is toxic, abrasive, difficult. Vanessa did not just fire me, she wrote my shadow profile into the industry. I spend a few weeks in a fog, watching savings shrink and wondering how fairness died. Then I hit a point where anger turns into a plan, because anger without a plan is noise. I cannot fight an industry rumor with speeches, but I can build a different scoreboard. I start freelancing small contracts at first. Companies too lean to afford politics. I promise one thing, I will find the waste, fix the flow, and you will see it in your invoices. First client is a regional furniture shipper bleeding money on last-mile chaos. I spend a week in their data, walk their warehouse, and map their bottlenecks in plain language. I renegotiate carrier lanes, redesign pick paths, and cut their damage rate by half. They save real money fast, and the owner tells his friends with the enthusiasm of relief. Word spreads in the only way that matters, because business people trust results more than rumors. I build a client base, then a small team, then a name that shows up in meetings. My work starts getting referenced, not by me, but by people who hate wasting money. After a year, a fast-growing competitor called Ridgeway Systems offers me a director role. They do not ask about my culture story. They ask about what I can fix and how fast. I accept because I want stability again, but I want it built on reality. At Ridgeway, I rebuild operations, hire sharp people, and set one rule. Evidence beats vibes. We grow, we win bids, we take clients from companies that think process is optional. My reputation becomes quietly strong, the kind that travels in CFO circles and procurement calls. Then the market shifts, freight rates wobble, and private equity starts moving pieces on the board. One morning, Ridgeway gets acquired by a larger group, and the announcement feels too cheerful. The parent firm is buying our company and also buying my old company, Lattice Freight. They plan to merge both into a new entity because spreadsheets love synergy and investors love control. I feel the old chill because mergers turn people into line items with smiles. New CEO is appointed, a hard-edged operator named Colton who is known for turning around messes. Colton requests a meeting with me, just me, which is never casual. His office is clean, quiet, and designed to remind you that power can be minimalist. He says he read my track record at Ridgeway, and he compared it to Lattice's decline. He says he does not care about internal drama. He cares about outcomes and leakage. He taps a chart where Lattice's performance drops around the exact time I left. He says my job is to stabilize the merged operation and remove whatever is dragging it down. He offers authority and a simple mandate: fix the system, keep the best people, cut the rest. I accept not because I dream of revenge, but because I like fixing broken machines. First weeks are audits, site visits, and meetings where everyone says alignment instead of truth. I fired Darren on day 5 after seeing 3 years of avoided decisions and 1 year of cowardice. Darren looks relieved, which tells me he never wanted the job, only the title. Then I dig into budgets and see the Horizon Initiative line items like a slow leak in a tank. Consultant fees, culture platform licenses, facilitation training, and headcount with unclear outputs. I read exit interviews from top performers who left, and all describe the same fog of fear. I see Titan Mart's complaint log and notice the service failure started after process slowed. The system tells the story without emotion, and that is why I trust it. Colton decides we need a leadership evaluation to reset accountability across the new company. He hires an external board advisor and asks me to co-lead the assessment, because I am credible. The assessment uses the same values framework Vanessa built, because corporate irony loves symmetry. Leaders will be scored on impact, execution, retention, risk reduction, and values alignment. I do not design the framework, I just agree to use it exactly as written. A list of leaders is scheduled for interviews, and I see her name like a ghost in daylight. Vanessa Klein, now Senior Director of People Experience, still in the building, still influential. The interview is set for Tuesday at 10, in the office that used to belong to Darren. Tuesday arrives with clean skies and a quiet hum from the air vents. My assistant says Vanessa is here and her voice contains a hint of curiosity. I say send her in and I keep my expression neutral like a locked door. Vanessa enters confident, professional, and smiling with the same practiced warmth as before. She starts a sentence about welcoming me to the new organization, and then she sees my face. Her smile freezes, her eyes flicker, and her confidence drains in a visible sequence. Recognition hits like a cold wave, and the room suddenly feels smaller around her. She recovers fast because she is trained to recover fast, but the crack stays visible. She says, "Mark, I did not expect to see you here," and her tone tries to be normal. I gesture to the chair and say, "Please sit," because professionalism is my armor. She sits carefully like the chair might accuse her of something if she moves wrong. I open the evaluation packet, which uses her own language, her own categories, her own terms. I say this is a leadership assessment focused on measurable impact and organizational health. I say we will discuss outcomes, retention, risk, and alignment with the stated values. Vanessa nods, and I can tell she is searching for a script that will control the room. I ask her to summarize the Horizon Initiative outcomes over the last 2 fiscal years. She talks about belonging, trust, psychological safety, and the importance of brave conversations. I listen, then ask for specific operational improvements tied to those programs. She names participation rates, engagement survey scores, and a reduction in reported discomfort. I ask how those metrics affected delivery times, error rates, client churn, or cost per shipment. She pauses, then pivots to long-term culture shifts that cannot be captured by narrow KPIs. I write that sentence down verbatim because it is a familiar escape hatch. I ask about turnover in high-performing roles and how her policies influenced retention. She says turnover is multifactorial, and people leave for personal reasons and market dynamics. I ask why exit interviews cite fear, bureaucracy, and unclear standards as primary drivers. Her face tightens and she says those interviews reflect perceptions that require compassionate context. I ask about Titan Mart's contract loss and whether her hiring changes affected competence in key teams. She says Titan Mart was a complex client with evolving expectations and unfair pressure. I ask why the service failure timeline matches the period after key specialists were pushed out. She says the organization needed new perspectives and old gatekeeping had to be dismantled. I note that she just described pushing out specialists as a goal, not as a side effect. Vanessa tries to reframe, saying change always triggers resistance among those used to privilege. I keep my tone calm and ask her to define privilege in a way that maps to our risk register. She blinks because risk registers do not have space for slogans. I ask about budget discipline and why consultant spend tripled while measurable outcomes declined. She says investment in people is never waste and we must not reduce humanity to spreadsheets. I nod and say understood, and I turn to the values framework section called accountability. I read the definition aloud because it is her wording, not mine, and it is sharp. I ask her to cite one instance where she changed her program based on negative evidence. She says the program evolved continuously through listening sessions and community feedback. I ask for a documented change log tied to measurable results, because that is standard governance. She says the team does not maintain that kind of documentation, because it can feel punitive. I write that down too because governance does not care about feelings. We finish the interview with polite closure and a quiet tension that clings to the walls. Vanessa stands, thanks me, and her voice is steady, but her hands are not. She says, I hope we can move forward professionally. And I say, of course we can. After she leaves, I do not celebrate, because celebration would make it personal. I open the scoring sheet and I fill it out like an engineer fills out a checklist. Impact on core business metrics is low, because the numbers are low. Risk reduction is negative because the system became fragile and clients noticed. Retention is poor because top performers left and documented why. Accountability is lacking because governance was avoided when evidence disagreed. Values alignment is paradoxically weak because her own framework requires measurable stewardship. I write the narrative summary carefully, using neutral language and tight structure. I avoid insults because insults are a confession of emotion, and I want none. I cite budgets, timelines, exit themes, and client outcomes with clean references. I use her favorite word, patterns, because patterns are what she once used against me. Report concludes that her leadership produced high cost, low operational benefit, and elevated organizational risk. I recommend reassignment away from operational influencing roles and removal of direct policy authority. The report is not revenge, it is a mirror held up at the exact right angle. Next week, the board meets in the long room with the expensive table and the quiet stakes. Colton presents the evaluation program and says we are restoring accountability and performance. Vanessa is there, confident again, sitting upright like posture can block consequences. Board members ask questions and Colton points to trend lines that do not flatter anyone. When my section comes up, Colton asks me to summarize the assessment findings. I speak calmly and state that I evaluated outcomes against the company's own framework. I say the data shows significant spend with limited measurable operational impact. I say turnover among high performers increased, and exit themes correlate with policy shifts. I say client outcomes deteriorated in parallel. increasing financial and reputational risk. Vanessa speaks up and says numbers cannot capture culture, and culture cannot be rushed. She says people are not machines, and leadership must be compassionate above all. One board member asks a simple question: what did we get for the money? Vanessa offers values language and future vision, and the room grows tired of fog. Another board member asks why governance artifacts are missing, and why decisions lacked change control. Vanessa says documentation can reinforce oppressive power dynamics and inhibit openness. Colton raises an eyebrow because investors do not accept oppression as an accounting category. Board members look at each other, and I can feel the moment the room chooses reality. Colton says we will restructure people experience under a compliance function with strict governance. He says Vanessa's role will be eliminated and replaced with a narrower position focused on policy adherence. Vanessa's face stays composed, but her eyes flash with disbelief and then with calculation. Board votes quickly because money moves fast when certainty returns. Meeting ends and people stand, talking quietly about next steps and operational priorities. Vanessa approaches me in the hallway where the carpet eats sound and the lights feel colder. She says you did this, and her tone tries to be moral, but it shakes at the edges. She says this is revenge, and she says it like naming it will make it smaller. I look at her and keep my voice even because evenness is the sharpest blade I own. I say no, it is just feedback, and the words land with the weight of symmetry. She stares for a second, then her shoulders drop as if the building got heavier. She says you could have protected me, and I say I used the framework you built. She says the framework was meant to protect people, and I say frameworks do what they are designed to do. She walks away fast, and I do not watch her leave because I am done looking backward. That night I go home, make dinner, and feel a strange quiet that is not joy or sadness. It is the quiet of a system returning to stable state after a long period of noise. Weeks later, I hear Vanessa took a role at a nonprofit specializing in workplace coaching. Apparently, she calls it a fresh start and tells people she learned hard lessons about metrics. Colton asks if I feel satisfied, and I tell him satisfaction is not a metric I track. He laughs, then stops laughing because he realizes I am not joking. Months pass and the company gets leaner, faster, and less afraid of honest conversations. The funniest part is the new culture feels better, because clarity reduces fear better than slogans. We implement a new feedback system that requires examples, evidence, and a chance to respond. People start joking again because jokes survive where trust exists. Titan Mart never comes back, but other clients notice the change and stop looking for exits. One afternoon, my assistant brings me a stack of old archived files from the prior HR system. She says they were scheduled for deletion and asks if we should keep anything for compliance. I flip through folders full of anonymous comments, vague accusations, and the word pattern repeated like a spell. In the back of one folder, I find a printout with my name and a familiar sentence highlighted. Feedback suggests your communication style can be intimidating to junior colleagues. I stare at it for a moment and notice the date, because dates always tell the truth. It was submitted at 9:12 a.m. on the day Vanessa announced the new feedback tool. I check the system logs and see the submission came from her own admin account. Not her personal login, but the account used to configure the tool before launch. She wrote my first complaint herself, then let the machine amplify it like an echo chamber. I could tell Colton, I could tell legal, I could turn it into a case and win loudly. Instead, I put the paper back, close the folder, and mark the whole archive for destruction. Because the cleanest victory is refusing to become what tried to break you. I walk out of the office into evening traffic and watch trucks move like patient numbers. Systems do not care about ideology. They only care about inputs, outputs, and friction. And if you build rules that punish competence, the system will eventually invoice you for it.